Thank you for watching Conscious Consumer Network. The live stream broadcast is free to view. You can pause and rewind live broadcasts to catch up, or view shows at a later date by accessing our free archives of all shows. Check out our broadcast guide to see what's on. You can show your support by donating to our network support fund. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or subscribe to the monthly newsletter for updates. We thank you for supporting free and independent media.
I wanna feel your fire, baby, let me dance in your love. I wanna feel your fire, baby, let me dance in your love. I wanna feel your fire, baby, let me dance in your love. I wanna feel your fire, fire burn, rising from the blaze, burn dies only to burn again. Let me dance in the rhythm of your flame. If I burn, let me die to burn again. If I burn, let me die to burn again.
Aloha everyone, and welcome to today's show of the Herbal Knowledge Keepers. And the theme that we're going to be presenting today with Dakota Grannywoman and myself, Blue Star Deer Woman, is Botanicals and Your Bones. I'm just going to take a moment though and talk about a few things that are related to our show. Some of you may have heard in just a few shows back that one of the things that's happening is Full Bloom Productions, Ozark Artist Healers, is a nonprofit 501c3, and our show, the Herbal Knowledge Keepers and Get Lit, are now under the umbrella of Full Bloom. And so the link that you see on the broadcast window, that's for contributions when you are in a position that you can assist either of our shows, both of our shows, helping us to continue to finance the launching of it with CCN. You can make a donation at that page. And Full Bloom Productions is about empowering women's voices. So I just wanted to put that out. And also, any contributions for Conscious Consumer Network.tv, because they are running on our donations. They are running on our care and support for an alternative media station, internet broadcast. So please, whenever you can, assist our platform with CCN as well. So today, we will start with Dakota, Grannywoman, and I just wanted to do a quick briefing on the origins of this show. Is based upon the Herbal database, okay? And this is a database that Dakota has been working on for, well, gosh, now it must be going on 12 years. I was saying 10 years for 2 years, so it's got to be about 12 years now. And it has an extensive amount of downloads and cross-referencing on medicinals and Eastern, Western medicines and and leading edge information. And so when you see the Herbal database brought up on the screen, which Dakota does each week, you will get more and more familiar with how it works. And so what we do is we use the database, and then whatever the topic of our show is, like today is Botanicals and Your Bones, then Dakota will demonstrate how she uses the database to get the information and the cross-referencing of that topic. And then the second half of the show, we do storytelling with Granny Woman. She has an incredible background, been in the woods, she's done that, bought the shirt, and so we like to move into her storytelling on the second half of the show, especially on episodes that we don't necessarily have a guest on with us. So I hope you enjoy the show. It's also call in. You can call in if you want to enter the conversation, and you can enter the chat room. And you just go to the live, where you're watching the live broadcast, and you have the option to log in and jump in the chat room, and you can ask us questions and contribute to the conversation. And welcome to our dear faithful chatters. We got Tracy and Jerry in the house. Love having you kids. Okay, so here we go. This is Dakota Granny Woman, and we'll begin our presentation.
Hi guys. It's an inspiration to me to be connected to so many people who share the same concerns and share their knowledge and experience of how to address them. So I have a number of friends who are, especially older women, who are freaked out about osteopenia and osteoporosis. So I decided to devote a show to them to help them understand that it's really not a big deal. And so that's what we're going to do, is use the database to show you the real truth, none of the fake news about osteopenia, and what's going on with osteoporosis, and get into some other things about bone health and, of course, bone disorders and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so usually I find that I run out of time. So I'm going to go ahead and open the database so that I can start showing it to you as we're going through everything. If you are already a subscriber to the database, it might be useful for you to go ahead and open it up and follow along with us and see for yourself what's there, especially if you have bones and are interested in keeping them.
And that's the URL on the screen for Dakota, the Herbal Database.online. That's where you can go to actually sign up with this database. And there's also a trial you can do. So you can go to that URL. And those of you, like Dakota said, that you already have it, that would be great to open it up and follow Dakota along. So you might need to go a little more slowly, knowing that others may.
Yeah, and plus I realize that as you're looking at this, you might be wanting to kind of read a little bit of the information there and take a look at the screen beyond what I'm describing. I do want to point out one thing. I'm always working on this, and I've added something new to the home screen here. This is what it looks like when you first log in. There's an area that's really important to us that has to do with herbs and supplements and drug interactions. It's something we need to think about whenever someone's taking any kind of pharmaceutical drug, even over-the-counter drugs. And they also want to take herbs and supplements. So how do you quickly determine whether it's safe? What kind of issues there might be? So I went ahead and put this on the opening screen so it's readily available. I'm going to click on it real quickly. In another show, we'll go through this kind of stuff. But here's about interactions with some of the major categories of drugs. Now, of course, when you look at the herbs themselves, that information is going to be in the individual herbs too. So here's interactions with anticonvulsants, antidepressant drugs. I'll just open one of these just to give you an idea. Some of you who aren't familiar with how the database works, I'll continue to repeat some of the basics just so you understand what's going on. But definitely go back to the first show where we have a whole hour devoted to working with this, how to get around, navigate it. So the information screen I'm going to lift up by clicking that upward pointing arrow. And here, for example, of people who are on antidepressants, cranberries, ginseng, hops, SAMe supplements, St. John's wort, those can all have potential interactions with antidepressants. And then you notice there's another connection here that goes up to the various antipsychotic and antidepressant drugs that are listed in the database itself. But right now we're going to go ahead and go to bones. I just wanted to let you know that I've made it easier for you to find these.
So what you're saying here, Dakota, is that, like, even what happened to me, I took ill with bronchitis, and for at least 2 weeks we were doing herbal treatments, and then I had to have that steroid, right, because of not being able to breathe. So I would be able to find that in there, for instance, like steroid and all those herbs that y'all treated me with.
Oh yeah.
All right, that's fascinating, because I've wondered about that, the precautions we have to take.
Yeah, it's really important
when we cross those medicines. So that's very rich data.
Really important, and I always look for that, and I have to really search far and wide, because often, you'll go to RX drug site that's supposed to tell you about what herbs interact, and they might have some, but they don't have it all, and it's not all known because they haven't tested every herb against every drug. That's crazy, but we do know some, and as we discover more interactions, then I'm loading them into this. So getting back to the bones, this is, if you look up bones, and by the way, you may have noticed I used this search screen. I just typed in bones. That search thing is not a button to click on. It's just a signpost. So I'll show you more of that later. So this is the opening screen for bones. And so remember, everything's color-coded. The green is going to be something having to do with a condition or a therapeutic technique or method. And I'm going to lift up the screen again, because this is just kind of general information about bone building, different studies and information about just bone health in general. So any of those blue links you can click on, right-click to open a new tab so you don't leave the database. These up here, these red ones are videos you can click on. It'll open into a new tab. Food to build bone health, new insight into bone joint health, et cetera, et cetera. So these are all very useful links just for an overview of bone health. Now, I've also added some things that are just in general good for the bones here. And so the red color, these are strong herbs. This purple color is going to be a phytochemical or plant constituent, and when you click on it, you'll see some of the plants that contain it. Then down here, we've got bone disorders, essential nutrients for bone health, monoterpenes in the bones, the wonders of bone healing. I'll click on that. This is an example of how you can watch a video within the database, and this is a lecture on bone healing. Interestingly, bones don't heal, they regenerate. It's one of the few areas of the body that regenerates, just like, how salamanders regenerate a leg when you cut it off, and supposedly we've lost that ability. Right. Well, bones do have retained that ability. Yeah.
So why do we think that they've healed? What are we thinking happened? Like they got stitched together?
Yeah, it's in this is kind of gets into quantum biology, another interesting topic.
Yeah.
And they're using electromagnetic forces, piezoelectricity, using certain minerals to actually regenerate rather than just pasting over with new tissue.
Sure. I mean, then we'd probably be touching into the substance of plasma, right?
Yeah. And I don't know if I've added it yet, but that's something I'm about to add, is a new category in here on plasma healing.
Nice. And Tracy, she's saying something interesting because she said, always suspected we could regenerate. Is this only our bones?
So far,
Oh.
it's the only last vestige of, apparently long ago when we were simpler creatures, and this is a theory that really simpler creatures, we had that ability, but it was lost as complexity developed. But the bones can regenerate. And I don't know that they regenerate to the extent that if you lose your arm bone, all of a sudden there's going to be an arm bone sticking out of your shoulder. But that's the method, it's limited, but that is the method that they use to restore themselves.
Regenerating. I wonder what came to mind is I wonder about when a human is born missing a limb. Where the regenerative consciousness is.
Well, it's all based on an energy matrix.
Yeah.
And communication in the system. And if the communication is saying, hey, there's no bone there, there's not going to be one.
Okay. But it wouldn't be like the phantom bone. That only comes with if you had the limb in this body and then you lost it.
Right.
Then the consciousness is there. But if you were born without it, it's almost like it doesn't exist.
Right.
In an astral realm.
Right. Yeah.
Tracy's asking a question here in the chat room. Does cell memory play into this? I guess that's what we're kind of touching on here.
That's a good question. It probably does, but I think it's a little bit more complicated than that, because what we're talking about is new cells, that don't have a memory yet because they are totally new. But there's communication going on inside the bone tissue that between, and that, I'm going to not get into that too much right now, but maybe if we have time, we can get into the section on, or maybe I'll just click on that right now.
And also I just I'm having a thought about that too, because the cell must have memory because, I've just been doing all that research on plant intelligence.
Yes.
And it's basically saying that our culture as a plant and as a human is ongoing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that memory can come from
it's not, but it's like DNA. When there's a new cell, the DNA is transferred over to the new cell, and that's where there would be memory.
Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Okay. So anyway, but also within the field, and that's a whole other topic that's quite interesting.
Yeah, well, that's because you brought up quantum.
I know, I should have done that.
And that's what prompted Tracy's question here. It's like, whoa, let's go there.
I do want to, we'll get into that. There's a section on quantum biology in here. I'm still adding to that. But anyway, we'll skip right over to bone anatomy and physiology here. Because if you're curious, just to know some of the basics, for example, if you get into bones, you're going to hear a lot about osteoblasts and osteoclasts. And so here's a little video that explains it. But those are two different kind of cells that are really important in bone health. The bones are always being remodeled. And in fact, the whole body does a similar process where cells get old and funky and they become useless and they should be done away with. And so there's always a process to get rid of that old stuff and then replace it with new cells, new healthy cells. Mm-hmm. And this is going on in the bones all the time with these two different kind of cells. The osteoblasts are the ones that build bone. They build new bone. And the osteoclasts are the ones that take apart old bone that's not really any good anymore. And the body absorbs that. So what happens, this gets right into osteopenia and osteoporosis as we get older, especially in women. There's a shift that happens. Like this is supposed to be balanced between these two cells to be remodeling. Like you don't want one to happen faster than the other. Mm-hmm. If you're making new bone all the time, you risk cancer, right? And if you're breaking down too much bone, you get bones with holes in them.
Wait, you have to clarify that, what you said, that first thing. Making cancer when you're going...
If for example, the osteoblasts become dominant and are just going gung-ho, and their osteoblasts are the ones that are making new bone.
Okay.
And they don't know when to stop. And so they're just, like if you really had a drug that pumped up osteoblasts so they could just build new bone, because you're worried about bone loss, mm-hmm. bone density loss. So you think, well, why not just take a drug and make lots of new bone? Mm-hmm. Well, that is a risk for cancer because cancer is runaway cell proliferation.
Oh, I see. So it doesn't just enhance the growth of bones.
Well,
but bones do grow, but it will enhance the cancer cell.
No, there can be bone cancer. I'm talking about bone cancer.
Okay, now I got you.
Yeah.
Now I understand.
Yeah. And
so
the body's so intelligent, it knows there has to be a balance. It's like, you want new bone, mm-hmm. but not too much new bone.
Okay.
And then it's balanced out with these osteoclasts. Those are the garbage men. Mm. And they go in, they find bone that's either damaged, like if you break a bone or something happens where the bone cells aren't functional. The osteoclasts recognize that. Mm-hmm. They go in and take it apart, right, so that it can be absorbed by the body.
So is this something, Dakota, that is being addressed in our Western approach to cancer? Like they're looking at osteoblasts and osteoclasts?
Possibly,
mm-hmm.
but it's being more, they're looking at it more in the context of osteoporosis. Mm-hmm. Because what happens as we get older, mm-hmm. It's just and especially in women, it happens in men too, but more in women after menopause, we don't make as many osteoblasts anymore. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And because we're not making as many osteoblasts, it gets unbalanced, and now you have more osteoclast activity where it's chewing up more bone. And so what happens is the bone, as we get older, just starts to thin out simply because there aren't enough osteoblasts to replace the bone that's being taken out by the osteoclasts. And so we're going to get into this, but the approach has been, well, what we need to do is put those osteoclasts to sleep. And that's the kind of drugs that they have been giving people, like Fosamax, is, well, if we just put those osteoclasts to sleep with Fosamax or these different variants on that drug, then we don't have to worry about losing bone because there's the cell that eats it up and gets rid of it is just not active. Mm. The problem with that is that now you've got old brittle bone sitting in there,
right? And
it's not about bone loss as much as it is about they're looking at bone density, how many holes are in the bones. And if they determine that you have low bone density, we'll get into that more later, because there are holes from the osteoclast that if you stop that, obviously the bone is going to be stronger, but that bone that's left is old and brittle. And so the bone quality is not good. And so those bones, and there are a lot of lawsuits out because of the fact that people are having what's called spontaneous fractures from that brittle bone. There was a story of one woman who was just wading out in I guess it was a creek or edge of a river or something, and a boat. I guess she was, the water was over her knees. A boat goes by some distance. In the wake of the boat, it has a little wave, right?
Right.
The wave from the boat comes up, slaps against her leg, and it breaks.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And that's the result of brittle bones. So, and it can be dense, it could be nice, dense, brittle bone, and it fractures. So we want there to be give in our bones. We want good bone quality.
Well, you know what I'm hearing too, and where my concern is that here we are once again, we're focusing in, which is good, into one small aspect of our anatomy. And it's like we are yet to understand the whole fabric of, when we start going in there and messing with this dynamic, for all we know, I mean, it's got to be doing something to our brain. It's doing something to our blood, So I guess just a reminder that, it's important information. And I always go to that intuitive place, like take that information and sit with it and go inside, do your remote viewing of your interior self and ask it, about this imbalance, and is this the best thing for you, and what have you. But anyway, it just got me concerned about the whole body.
Yeah. Well, and obviously our, but the interior bones produces blood for us, so it is involved with blood.
I know you want to go forward, but there was one other thing I would like you to clarify. You did make mention of those two words you had said to me earlier, osteoporosis and osteopenia. Osteopenia, and you mentioned it, so I was wondering if you could clarify.
That's where we're going.
Okay, good.
So we're going to go down to bone disorders. Okay. Now, these are major categories, and we're not going to go to spinal disorders right now or fractures. We might get there later. We're going to go to bone and cartilage diseases. And you can see there are quite a few different areas. Some of them are pretty obscure: black bone disease, scoliosis. We're not going to get into all that, but it's here. And you've got an area that's diseases of the joints, if you want to get into that, but we're not going to go there today. I just want to show you kind of the overview. Bone disease, that's a fancy word. Osteochondropathy, just bone disease. We're going to go here, and these are all considered different diseases of the bones. Notice there's a scroll bar that appeared down here at the bottom, and I can drag that to see more of this. They're green because this is to do with conditions. Now I'm going to look up osteopenia right now. I could have clicked into the search box, but it appears. So when I click on that, it's going to open up, and this is all a relational database, so everything that's directly connected to it is relevant to this condition. So we see omega-3 fatty acids. Well, those are good for osteopenia. Physical exercise is good for it. Kefir. And then here are essential nutrients for bone health. But let's get into osteopenia right here. And here's some good information, but I'm going to go through this with you guys. You can get into the database and look it up, but I think this is what we need to share. So the definition of osteopenia has to do with if the bone is examined in X-ray, and they find that there's a standard deviation score of 1.0 to minus 2.5, then they call it osteopenia. But here's the thing. This is a complete invention. Back, let's see, before 1990, osteoporosis was defined as any unexplained fracture was due to osteoporosis. That was the definition. And it was pretty vague.
Yeah.
So the pharmaceutical companies provided the funding for the World Health Organization to convene a meeting with all these experts from around the world to come up with a better definition of what is osteoporosis. They didn't really know. That's not that long ago, but they really didn't know. And so this meeting occurred in 1992 in Italy. And what they decided after, they all were talking, they decided that they would consider osteoporosis to be a standard deviation of 2.5 from the bone of a 30-year-old white Northern European woman. That was considered the norm, a 30-year-old white Northern European woman. Well, the thing about bones, it's not all the same. So the thickest bone, and we're talking about just bone density, by the way. That's the only thing they're looking at.
And that's what that 2.5 represents.
It's about
density.
Bone density.
Okay.
But the thickest, most dense bone occurs in a Black African male. The thinnest bone density occurs in the Northern European white woman. So that was taken as the norm, the 30-year-old. However, after the age of 30, but especially after the age of 50, the bone just naturally starts to thin out for women. So anyway, the really interesting thing is that the doctors and researchers there said, okay, what do we do about, like there's a broad range there between this normal healthy bone and then osteoporosis. Like there's a gray area. What do we do about that gray area? And they decided, they came up with this term osteopenia for it. And even though it's normal, like considered normal bone, and it's really interesting, and there's links in here too. It's really interesting because they never intended it to be a description of a disease process. They never intended for it to be anything that was considered a treatable condition. It was just the normal aging of bones, and it was, and they never meant for there to have to be any kind of medication for it, nothing. It was just for research purposes so that they had these numbers to go with, right?
So then are we talking about big pharma picked it up and saw a way to exploit?
Yeah, so what happened was Merck comes out with Fosamax in 1994, right? And now they need to sell it to a lot of women. And they've got this new definition of osteopenia, which is pretty, means you don't have totally normal bone. That's all you need to know. And it's not osteoporosis, but they have this new definition. So now they need for women to be getting their bones checked for bone density. And at that time, there were only about 200 DEXA, like really high quality DEXA machines that could do full bone scanning and really come up with a reading. By the way, there's reasons why X-ray is not a good way to analyze bone. But we don't have time to get into that, but it's not a good, accurate way. So there were only 200 machines. They needed more. So what they did was they created something called the Bone Measurement Institute. And the Bone Measurement Institute was one guy with a desk. It wasn't, didn't have its own building or anything. It wasn't nonprofit. It was just one guy with a desk in the Merck, one of the Merck buildings. And what he did was he found this cheap peripheral bone density machine that just measured bone density in the wrist, the forearm, and I think the heel or the ankle. And that's not an accurate way to really measure bone, but it was cheap. And
Sure, and it
so
was a
they
way
got,
to make money.
So the whole thing that institute did was to sell them to the doctors, and they even gave away these machines to the doctors so they could all be doing these scans of these aging women. And of course they would find that most of them, it's not all, but almost all women will have thinning of the bone. And so then they say, well, don't worry about it. You know, it could lead to osteoporosis, but we've got this drug Fosamax that will stabilize it and strengthen that bone, and, you know, there won't be any more bone loss. And so I want to read this little quote here. Osteopenia is, in fact, a medical and diagnostic non-entity. The term itself describes nothing more than a statistical deviation from an arbitrarily determined numeric value or norm. According to the osteoporosis epidemiologist, Dr. Joseph Melton at the Mayo Clinic, who participated in setting the original criteria, osteopenia was just meant to indicate the emergence of a problem, and noted that it did not have any particular diagnostic or therapeutic significance. It was just meant to show a huge group who looked like they might be at risk. Another expert, director of the Oregon Osteoporosis Center, criticized the newly adopted disease category by saying, "We have medicalized a non-problem."
Oh my gosh. I mean, talk about creating fake news.
Yeah.
Isn't it right?
And I have clients who come to me, students who are freaked out because they went for their exam and the doctors gave them this test and said, you've got osteopenia.
Oh my gosh.
And wants them on Fosamax, even though there are lawsuits.
Wow.
And they're winning these lawsuits.
Yeah.
And it's not just Fosamax, but these bisphosphonates, these class of drugs, and we'll go look at those.
Wow.
And this is what's really interesting, is that there are these DEXA-generated Z-scores, and you can also have T-scores. Z-scores compare your bones to people of your own age. Why not do that?
Yeah, exactly.
And when you have a Z-score comparing your bones to people of your own age, it changes the picture.
Sure does, because then you have an assessment of, oh, well, you're at approximately, it's kind of like when we go through menopause and changes. It's like we know there's an approximate age that we all go through that.
Yeah.
So if you're outside that age range, then you're concerned. It's like, well, wait a minute.
Right.
You know, I've stopped bleeding and I'm still 38 years of age. So, you know.
I mean, and there's been an effort to make older women do all kinds of crazy things to try to appear 30 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
And
oh goodness, we need some help on our planet.
So anyway, but here's the thing is, I want to just, I'm going to read another quote here. Having higher than normal bone density in middle-aged and older women increases their risk of breast cancer by 200 to 300%. And this according to research published in some of the world's most well-respected and authoritative journals, Lancet, JAMA, and here are some links here that you can go to see those studies, all right? So nature's smart, the body's smart. It realizes that, we can't really get into breast cancer in this show, but it realizes that estrogen, which is also involved in the whole process of building bone, estrogen needs to be lowered as we get older for a number of reasons. And one of them is because it can drive breast cancer. It's just fascinating. So I think we can just say at this point that ladies, don't worry about osteopenia. Not at all. If you want healthy bones, we'll get to that next. There's a lot of just intelligent stuff that we can do that supports bone health.
Right.
And that's what, in a way, even have the diagnosis, because we all need to be doing these things anyway. And it's just,
Exactly. And just, well, and there's a greater message here too, Dakota. And as much as I really appreciate how each episode you're focusing on a topic and go deeply into it, but the greater picture is what's really resonating for me is that piece of research about a medical term that then is capitalized in our world. Mm-hmm. And we never really go and check the term. And I think that is also highlighting the value of this database. Yeah. Is that when we get diagnosis, and we know that the Western medicine has some good diagnostic tools. It's the translation and interpretation of it that we have to be very knowledgeable about. But when they make that diagnosis, know your word. Know the word.
Yeah. And also know the methodology they're using to make the diagnosis. For example, mm-hmm. X-rays are not good at determining bone health. They can be thrown off. Mm-hmm. For example, high estrogen levels can cause edema that darkens the tissue, that makes it can alter the reading. Mm-hmm. And they are, the radiation is another thing that suppresses the osteoblasts. All right, mm-hmm. And the radiation can stay in the bone for a period of time and inhibit bone building. Whereas ultrasound is a better diagnostic tool that you can get a more accurate reading without damaging. In fact, ultrasound seems to even stimulate the osteoblasts. So what we want to do is, like, as we look at some of the things that we can do, especially if people, well, I should back up a second. So let's say somebody has a diagnosis of osteopenia, right? Or they are having, for some reason, their bones checked. Mm-hmm. What they need to look at isn't the number that they have been given, 1.5. What they need to be looking at if they have a question, is this moving towards osteoporosis, which is not a good thing. The way to answer that is when you have consecutive bone density tests, you are looking for the rate of bone change and deterioration, not the number, but how fast it's happening.
So again, there we have to have that age range that it's most likely to have bone deterioration, that we know that it's likely to be in this range. So don't worry about it. You're, 75 years of age. Right. It's at 3.6 or whatever, and that's appropriate.
But it could be a concern if, because osteoporosis does start out, you start out with healthy bone and then it just goes down. Mm-hmm. And so people who are worried that they might be heading in that direction. First of all, get into the database, get a subscription to the database and look at all the things you can do to prevent that or even to reverse it. Right. But it's what you're looking at is the speed of change, not right. Because you could have 1.5 for 10 years or 5 years and
then all of a sudden it makes a jump or something.
And now all of a sudden, it's like it's like, I don't know, 2 and within a short period of time. And so that means there's something going on that you need to be concerned about. Right. But why not, instead of being all worried about that, why not turn the attention towards the lifestyle, the nutrients, the herbs that strengthen our bones and not just make them denser. That's not the issue, but improve the quality.
It's like we're not stopping the aging process. We're just keeping our bodies as comfortable and as supported as we can because we have that knowledge.
And there's a natural side to aging that's healthy, that is like getting rid of certain things to keep us going. So anyway, now I'm going to use the search box to look up
Okay, but
Oh, go ahead.
one thing, because what I'm hearing is, and maybe it's a prompt to all the herbalists out there, and I know there's a fine line in what you're allowed to put on a supplement, you know, legally and the FDA and what have you. But it seems to me that we would want the evolution of putting on an herbal remedy these particular words, these medical Western words somehow.
You can.
But can we, you know, like what you just, osteopenia, like it would be really phenomenal to see it, you know, on, I think I saw fenugreek was one of the herbs. I don't know which one it was. I saw them flash by one of the herbs.
You can't. It's
See, that's I think that's where we need to go lobby and get rid of, because people are more educated now. We can be a pharmacist.
But that's what the database is for.
Yeah,
and
we're
so
doing it in here.
It's illegal to put onto
the label
anything what it treats.
Yeah,
but it's not illegal to become educated.
Exactly.
And so because they've done that for us, where we can't just go buy some herbs for osteopenia, thank you very much.
Right.
That means we have to get as smart as the doctors.
Yeah. Well, we're actually getting smarter than the doctors is what we're proving.
And help the doctors, yeah. So that's what this is all about, is like, okay, well, how do we deal with this? So osteoporosis, this one is a bad guy. And here's I've lifted up the information screen. This just shows you, here's the normal bone, and now you see all these holes in the bone. And this bone is weakening. If you have been taking Fosamax, it's also very, very brittle. And that's a real danger. By the way, on Fosamax, there's some other things that happen with it. And besides making the bone brittle, it can give you an irregular heartbeat. And it can lead towards something called osteonecrosis of the jaw. That's where the jawbone just dies. And in fact, there's some dentists that won't even work on patients who are taking these drugs.
How do you spell that, Fosamax? Is it
F-O-S-A-M-E-X. I'll show it to you.
Fosamax, okay.
Yeah, it's in here.
And that's a typical prescription for osteoporosis.
That's the big one. Boniva is another one.
And I suppose you also have research on Fosamax and its constituents. And
yeah, in fact, I mean, this is where you get into the drug section. So,
yes, I love.
So for example, I can just go down here to the search box and type in Fosam. As soon as you start typing, it'll start coming up. So this alendronic acid is like the scientific name. Fosamax is a brand name. And so here it's a bisphosphonate is the type of drug that it is. Here's a list of the bisphosphonate drugs if you want to see if the drug you're on is categorized here. And here are a couple of things that it can cause. Atrial fibrillation, osteonecrosis, and then here's information about.
That's what Fosamax
this
can
is
do.
about Fosamax.
Okay. Nice.
And but if we go up, it's always good to look around, because if we go up to this is like a higher level heading of this type of drug, and we lift this up. Now you see, just in this general category, a lot of information that covers all these different drugs. They're linked to cancer risk, how they interact with your bone. So
when this information is coming out, Dakota, is this kind of like leaks in our journalists?
No.
This is real data that the doctors and the pharmaceuticals
they have access
are producing.
There are journals, like peer-reviewed journals, that come out with this stuff. So it's out there. The doctor should know it. But it takes a lot of time to hunt that up. That's not the stuff that's being presented to them by the pharma rep that comes to show them the latest stuff on drugs. They're not seeing it. Sometimes they try to hide it and they bury studies. But
Right.
Um,
But they're not hiding this information.
they probably have hidden some of it. How will we know? But we've got enough information, to tell us that we don't want this stuff.
Right.
So anyway, let's go back to osteoporosis. And there may be, I'm not against the drugs altogether. There may be cases where somebody's bone is just falling apart, and you got to do something. And so that's when maybe Fosamax could come into the picture and help somebody out.
Right.
It's like there's no question. It's do something or they're gone.
Sure. And I think that's important. That's where I had to come to with Western medicine. First, I had to be angry about it and not want to do any of it, And this is early on when herbs were just really getting our attention. But then later on, when I sat with that, I thought, well, wait a minute now. There's so many obvious things in Western medicine that are good.
Yeah. In the right context.
In the right context, exactly. And that's when I turned around and said, no, it's okay. And again, you have to become your own advocate. I'm such a warrior on that. Yeah. You've got to be educated. You have to be responsible.
Yeah. So here are risk factors for osteoporosis. I won't go through all of them. You can come into the database and read it yourself. But idiopathic kidney stones, environmental, genetics, skin color, body size, and risk factors specifically for men. Hypothyroidism, cortisol, glucocorticoids, there's your steroids, polyunsaturated fats, which is interesting, poor intake of calcium, radiotherapy, menopause, lack of vitamin D, inactivity, smoking, excessive alcohol intake, high sodium intake, too much coffee, high consumption of animal protein, high acid diet, and just so you can read about why all of these things and certain medications, and then even chlamydia and pneumonia. So you can come in here and look at these risk factors and go, okay, what of this can I deal with to get rid of that?
All right, we do have a question in the chat room. Jerry's asking, I'm curious if oyster shell calcium in pill form is a good preventative supplement. My mother has been taking it for many years and never had any bone osteo issues.
No, it's not good. And it's, that she hasn't had any bone issues is great. And but I'm going to look up calcium right here. And let me just look.
I remember when the oyster shell calcium came out.
Calcium supplements in general are not advised. It's best to get it from your food. And this is all about.
And then I always heard something about you don't do calcium unless you do magnesium.
Yeah, but here's the thing is that let me just pull up this. I think I'm going to have to break this down a little bit and add a special section here on this. It's not recommended because it's not that we lack calcium, but we lack the other nutrients to use the calcium properly.
Right.
And so if you're taking calcium, there are studies that have shown that people who are taking calcium supplements for the bones actually wind up with more fractures and their bones are more brittle.
Really?
Yeah. And so
because it doesn't have the other supplements, unless they actually are getting those supplements somehow.
Yeah, but even so, it's best to get it from food or a whole food supplement that has a high calcium content. Chia seeds are really high in calcium, and so ideally you get it in food. But no, calcium is not considered the way to go.
Even that product, there's a real popular product out there that what's it called? Calm.
Oh yeah,
with calcium and magnesium in them.
Oh, here we go. Let's see. Is this? Oh no, that doesn't. That's it. Not yet. I'm gonna for you guys. I'll break down a special section on calcium for bones. It's probably in here, but I'll make it easier. like I did here, magnesium and bone health, protein and bone health, vitamin K and bone health. I kind of broke it out a little bit just to, you see down here.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
I broke out the information to make it a little more specific to what's going on. So the nutrients for bone health, that's the section we're on here. And let's see, we're getting, oh gosh, we're going to run out of time again.
No, we won't.
Well,
We can,
go a little over.
yeah, because you'll be able to tell
So,
stories. And Tracy's saying, what? Oh, she takes magnesium, she's saying, but
Yeah.
not calcium.
Good girl. That's what I do too. I stopped taking calcium years ago when I found out about this.
Okay.
Leads to brittle bones. So anyway, I'm going to, if we have time, I'll go through some of these, but I just want you to see they're here. And when you go to them, like boron is super important. Each of these is going to tell you also what is a safe range, because some of these things you can have too much of. And it shows what are some of the foods that are high in boron. It turns out prunes improve bone quality and bone density. Boron stimulates bone formation, inhibits bone resorption, resulting in a therapeutic effect against osteoporosis. And here's a whole section on boron for bone health and how much to take and what kind of foods to get it in. You try to aim for foods, but sometimes you don't have the foods available.
Sure. And Jerry has access to your database. Is that correct?
I don't know,
Right,
Jerry.
I thought Jerry was on it.
I don't know. It's been a long time, Jerry. Do you have it? Do you have access to it?
So I was going to say, I wondered, and I didn't know if Jerry, if you were on when we were suggesting you could have your database open with us. I thought you were, but let us know.
Okay, so here are some herbs that are helpful. Believe it or not, ginseng, Asian ginseng. It's a ginsenosides, and so you can go to, I don't know if I have time to go through all of these. Anyway,
So, but we got the idea.
You can go through these, and these, like black hoof mushroom. What you want to do is really go for that balance where you're not just shutting down, some of these things shut down the osteoclast, like Fosamax does, but they don't have the side effects. However, if there's too much bone loss, some of these foods will slow down the activity and even the creation of those osteoclasts. And some of them act on the osteoblasts. And so you want a balance where you're supporting both of them in a good way. And some of these get into that on how they are working. Cumin, black hoof mushroom, black or purple rice, prunes, nigella, which is like black seed, black cumin. Some of them are a little obscure, but even chamomile, kudzu, ashwagandha, these all help support the bone health. And then surprisingly, I do have to mention this one, phytates, because for a long time we were told that you had to soak your grains and soak your nuts to get rid of the phytate, because phytate interfered with mineralization of the bone. That turned out not to be true. In fact, people who have a high phytate diet have stronger, higher quality bones than people that avoid phytates. And here's a whole deal about phytate and the whole story. This is another story where they originally tested in the 1940s on puppies and gave them a lot of phytate. Well, of course, puppies don't eat phytate, right? And they found that that interfered with their mineral absorption, and then that part started the story about phytate being bad. And phytates in grains, all seeds, all nuts, pretty much all seeds have a lot of phytate. And then another study came out where they fed rats the equivalent of 10 loaves of bread a day, and sure enough, they had difficulties.
Well, my gosh, that would kill anybody. Really, 10 loaves of bread.
Yeah, that much phytate and coming in.
Oh
So
my gosh.
then they finally started testing on humans. And here's a study, phytate levels and bone parameters, a pilot clinical study where they evaluate the relationship between phytate in the diet and the bone strength. So what would be shocking to a lot of people is to find out that they don't need the calcium supplement. They need to make sure they're getting phytate. It's totally turns everything around.
Wow.
We learned, all of us, for a lot of us, were soaking everything like crazy to get rid of phytate. And that was not good. Here's a study where they studied the protective effect on phytate on bone mass loss in postmenopausal women. And this was over 12 months, and it reduced the hip fractures.
Wow.
I mean, it's just incredible. So, yeah.
Jerry got back to us. Yes, he said he did have access, and life's just taking him out of his studies for a bit.
Okay.
But he's looking forward to being back on once things settle down.
Okay, good.
And I responded to Jerry. It's like, oh my gosh, life.
Yeah.
Love.
Yeah.
Life.
Yeah. Okay, so I do want to take us to fractures. Like you've got stuff here on this side. These are some of the drugs that can cause osteoporosis. Here's information on cortisol and bone loss. That is a big factor. Constant chronic stress and high cortisol levels eat up the bone. Mm-hmm. So that's another reason
high stress.
Yeah.
Well, we know stress just diminishes everything.
Yeah, everything.
It just does.
Here are your steroids, glucocorticoid-induced osteoporosis. So people who are on steroids for a long time, whatever they are, there's a type of osteoporosis. It's actually called basically steroid-induced osteoporosis.
I believe it.
And so people who have asthma are at risk for this, using glucocorticoids, and then, of course, osteoporosis is connected. Here's some things that help offset that. Parsley leaf, chicory, sweet basil. And I want to go down my breadcrumbs.
See, and there it is again. It's like you see that prolonged use, not understanding the drug is really where we get ourselves in trouble.
Yeah.
These one time, like I said, that one-time steroid shot, immediately I could breathe. Yeah. I was grateful, but then I didn't want to be on any more of that.
No. Now, you can check out hip fractures here, and this takes us into the fracture section. So some of the things that cause hip fractures are calcium channel blockers, proton pump inhibitors. Guys, if you think you have GERD, that's a whole other topic. Look it up in the database. You may be using a proton pump inhibitor drug regularly. That can lead to hip fractures. So here's a whole section on fractures in the elderly. But let's just go to fractures for a minute, because
you hear about that a lot in the elderly, fractures.
Yeah. And there's another study that came out and said that most of the fractures, shockingly, are a result of falling, not weak bones.
Well, and that's usually when our attention is drawn to it.
Yeah.
Is someone takes a fall.
Yeah. And the reason for the falling has more to do with balance problems, with gait problems, with poor eyesight, and it's not about the bones.
Exactly.
It's just about those other things.
Yes. Yeah.
So here's this whole big section on fractures, and we've got all these different kinds of fractures, like complications, diabetic fractures, elbow fractures. So if you think you've got something fractured, you can come in here and maybe get a little bit of a clue on what's going on. Right. And then all of these herbs help to heal fractures. So let's just pull over here.
Yeah.
And also vitamin K2, which is really important for bones. Very, very important. It works with calcium and vitamin D. If you want to think supplements, the picture that's coming together is vitamin D3, K2, which comes in a couple of different forms, and maybe some boron, silica, really important, genistein, which is a phytoestrogen, is used, and there's a combo that can be put together, and you can get a lot of it from your food.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the article you sent me on marijuana and fractures.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, my gosh, across the board, isn't marijuana just proving to be just
I know. Yeah.
anything and everything cure?
Yeah. Liquid trace minerals, horsetail. Horsetail, I think I will say something about horsetail. So silica turns out to be really important also for the bones. And here in the Ozarks, our soil isn't very well mineralized. Mm-hmm. Same deal in Peru, in the Andes. Their soil isn't well mineralized. And in Peruvian herbal medicine, they have a tradition as a result of that of adding just a little bit of a horsetail extract to just about every formula that they use. And this is one of the things that helps to normalize the mineralization in the body. And it because it's not so much that it contains a lot of silica, which is a mineral, but it seems, and it's really curious, it's like there's a silica bioenergetic property that's an energetic property of silica in horsetail that goes down deep down into the matrix to kick things off.
Mm-hmm. I just Jerry just said he just looked up K2 in diet and found chicken drumsticks are high in K2. I love that. He says love that too. I love that too. And then Tracy, again in the chat room, it's interesting. She said she had just recently been looking up, where did I see it? Black seed oil. And I too was looking that up the other night. Now I was looking it up because of respiratory, but is there?
It covers a lot.
Covers a lot. Huh?
And it's not just the oil, you know, you can take it.
Yes, and the black seeds.
But I do want to say more about silica while we're on it.
Okay.
When you click on silica, you see some of the foods that are high in silica. The top one, it turns out, according to studies, if you have a beer every day, your silica content is quite good.
Well, I have no problem with that.
And the reason is because of the way that the grain and hops are fermented together. It creates a very nice silica supplement. And so that's another reason to get good quality beer. Mm-hmm. And they even said in this one study, you know, that if you're not drinking beer every day, you might want to take a silica supplement.
Interesting. You know, I love when that kind of information comes around. It's like, I just always feel like, wait a minute, when I sit down and drink that really good beer, it feels good in my body. I can't deny that. But I always feel like, you know, in moderation, just anything in moderation.
If it's
how can you go wrong?
If it's a good, let me click on beer. If it's a good quality, it's it's like loaded with all kinds of nutrients. And
well, it's like when every homegrown, homemade beer, I mean, you can taste the medicinal of it. Mm-hmm. It's just amazing. I mean, you drink one of those and everything is there. You can feel it. Mm-hmm. Feed your body.
Yeah, people should make it themselves. I just clicked onto beer just to show its connection here.
Wow.
To the fermented beverages and the different types of organisms that are used in making it. And we've got recipes on wild beers here. Ham's Quarters beer. These are
nice.
The brew is means wild. It's a wild food. Right? And here's a link to Sour Funky and Wild Beer. And you go there and get into that. So anyway.
Nice. So you feel like we're ready to move on to some storytelling? Or is there something else that you want to...
We could keep going. Guys, before we move on, is there anything to do with bones that you'd like to cover?
So that question is going out to the viewers. You can respond to it via the chat room, and or you can call us. Either way. And you can telepathically send it in. Let's see if we can pick it up. I think we're all back on that beer as medicine was good. They're liking that.
Okay. So
Shall we move on
All
to, and I'll give an introduction?
I
All
guess I
right.
have to close my.
Oh, sure, if you want to close the share screen. And actually, I think that's a lot, when we're visually looking at this database. It's so, to me, as much as I look at it with you, all right?
Mhm.
And I'm not pulling it up every day, obviously, but it takes time to adjust to all that data. And then you have to get real centered and go after what you're going after, because it's kind of like you can go on the internet inside your database and it's like you can get lost forever.
Well, it depends on why you're there. Sometimes people want to get lost.
Yeah.
But if you have a purpose, it'll save you a lot of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you want to find out what's the deal on osteopenia, rather than spending hours clicking all over the internet.
Sure.
You just go boom.
And it also went through the filter review. It's like, you're taking the time to, so I like that where, just your credibility, when I go into that database, it's like, well, wait a minute, Dakota thought this was significant. I know you spent time with it. And it's kind of like, I don't know why I'm on this fake news thing, but it's coming up again. It's kind of like, I'm so looking forward to the day that there's one media station, right, that just like you're the database station, right, that it's gone through that particular person or filter, and by the time the news is brought forward, you know the credibility's there. You know that it's not fake news. They've done their homework. They've done their research. I mean, I guess, there's some people out there that we think of that. But anyway, I just couldn't help making that analogy.
Thank you. I do want to say, though, that I try to show different perspectives. So it's not like just my perspective of what is good. So there's a lot in there from the conventional medicine point of view, because I think people need to know that. What is it? What do they think about this or that? And so I like the contrast about looking at, well, what is your doctor thinking? Assuming he's just, a regular conventional doctor, what has he been trained to believe about this?
Right. And
then what is the naturopath thinking about this? What's their story? And what about the homeopathy guy? And it's up to us to be able to have that larger perspective, to be able to bring it together and say, well, what do I think about it? So and I don't just give like one point of view.
Exactly. No, and I recognize that. It's just that, again, it's that credibility. It funnels through you, even though it's all different perspectives. And it brings me back to the news again. It's like what you just said. I'm just having these moments of analogy of, like when we listen to different news sources, and I know in my own self, I'll be listening to something and I'll be so into it. I can be, I'm in that moment. I'm so engrossed.
Yeah.
It's like I've taken on that perspective and belief, and I'm letting it just kind of jostle around in my body, right? And I'll watch myself, like for that moment, I can represent that viewpoint, right? And then the next thing I know is another perspective comes at me, or I'm doing my research, and it's like I'm totally engrossed in that. It jostles me around, and now I'm like, oh, whoa, this is in total opposition of what I engrossed myself in yesterday. And it's like, oh, I hope I didn't go onto Facebook too soon with this idea, right? And so, and I'm seeing the analogy right now of here we go into the database, right? And you've offered conventional and non-conventional perspectives, right? And in one moment, you're totally engrossed and you're going, oh my gosh, you're totally involved in that conventional thing, right? and then you turn the page, do another click, then the next thing you know, you're like, oh my gosh, these are in total opposition. So for some reason, I think it's really healthy today to acknowledge that we get ourselves in, perhaps that's a predicament, perhaps that is our own database moment of, okay, you're asking yourself what is true, what is true. And in the end, we pick and choose.
Yeah.
Like if I go into the database or I go into all that multimedia news, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm in a conversation with someone about a topic. Have you ever noticed, I noticed something that really impressed me is true. I'll speak to it. I'll go, oh, I was in the database the other day and I got this information about da-da-da. Or I was listening to this particular station and that's what came up. So I think that's one of the ways, like, without being too mental, watch after you experience an episode like this, or you experience 6 different news outlets, and then you're in your very social context. Watch what you actually speak to.
Yeah.
And I think it'll reveal, what's truth to you in that moment. I just had to go off on that for a moment. And there are some, let me see now. Jerry and Tracy have been commenting here. Let's see. You remember? Oh, yeah. Okay. We all agree. Beer is that was a fun one. We definitely like that. And yeah, and you're getting exactly a database I can truly trust. Thank you, Dakota. And Jerry said, no more questions for him. Thanks for answering me earlier and for covering bones today. Tracy, yes, got to know both sides in order to view the bigger picture. Yeah, but that moment of you've got both sides and it's like, where's the bridge?
Yeah.
And Jerry's saying he loves when you point to remedies in foods that we've already incorporated into our regular diet.
Yeah.
You rock, Granny Woman.
Well, you rock for eating that way.
Yeah. And, thank you. Tracy appreciates the way I put what I just shared. Come with the ability to see all perspectives and come to our own belief. And thank you, Jerry. He's thanking me too. Yeah, I just needed to get on that roll. I got very excited about that revelation. Because as you know, I'm always after that consciousness barometer. You know, it's like, okay, now where do we take how this inspires us and where it moves us?
Well, to add one more thing to that.
Sure.
One of the concepts behind the database is to inspire people to do their own thinking, because it's designed for folks to discover relationships between things themselves. You know, I kind of put up a little teaser there with all these connections, but it's up to you to go, what's that connection about? And then, I'm not spelling it out necessarily, I'm just saying there's a connection between these two things. And so you go and look at them and go, this is the connection. And so you're on the path of, doing your own critical thinking of what's real and feeling your way through, because it's true that there's a lot of stuff there, but you're not going to see it all. And certain things will pop out to you because of the filter that is already in your mind looking for answers. When we ask a question, that is like the go signal to our mind and brain to start looking for an answer to that question. So the database is really designed for that, where if you have a question and your brain is so intelligent and it sees, here's this huge field for me to just make a beeline to the answer that I need. And it probably already knows the answer.
Yeah.
And that's the one that's going to pop out. And when it pops out, because it already knows the answer, it's going to tell you what the connection is between these different things.
Well, then, for me, then we're getting into the field that I love studying. as we go into the field of our spirit selves and our consciousness, and that every part of our being is intelligence. And here we are with the plant world of intelligence, and all the information is present to us. So we can drop into that very deep, multidimensional realms of existence and listen and remember that we are very much the origin. We are very much the database of origins.
Yeah, and plants are here to lead the way.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, I like that bridge. It feels like we just went smoothed out a really beautiful path, laid with petals of roses from the mother to our external physicalized world of health and healing. So here we go.
All right. Where are we going? Lead the way.
Okay, I'm going to lead the way. So what we like to share when we don't have a guest in the second half of the show is we invite Granny Woman to tell stories. And just to give you a little bit of the history of the past is not only is Dakota Granny Woman fifth generation in herbalism and the understanding of the medicine of the earth, and now the science of medicine. But along the way, Granny Woman decided she wanted to go and explore being in the wilderness. And one of my favorite things that she shares is that, she really wanted to go into the wilderness and I don't know exactly, I'm not saying exactly the way you do, Granny, but basically find out how benevolent the universe really is. It's like, if I go into the wilderness and I need this or I need that to survive, surely if the universe is benevolent, I will be cared for. And so Granny Woman did do that for 10 years. She went into the wilderness, and a lot of the experiences and the healing and the understandings, the love, wisdom that was gained during that 10 years is very much integrated and infused in this awesome herbal database that we all now have and get to share. So what I'd like to do is, I've always liked to just to get the picture, okay? If maybe you could just give a brief, like kind of a bio, Dakota, of who were you, where were you, what were you doing up to that point where you made the decision to go into the wild, right? And I know you have some stories to share that are appropriate to our theme today, that you learned something about bones and botanicals there. So let's start with who were you before you came to that place of, I'm going to the wilderness?
Well, that's not a short story.
No.
I was many people, and I'd done many things, lived many places, ranging from being a musician in the French Quarter and involved with the person who founded Preservation Hall, to working at an executive level in television and movies, being involved with big pictures like Forrest Gump and stuff like that, and going to Peru to study shamanism with Alberto Villoldo and his teacher Eduardo Calderon in the 80s, and then studying type of Huna with Serge King for a few years and as an apprentice, and I just on and on and on. Grew up in Colorado. My mother was a rancher, and I left Colorado because it was too cold, and I had a Montessori school that became very well known for many years, and I was involved in creating a fashion watch company, made fashion watches in Japan and sold them all over the country. I had a business of a vegetarian home delivery business where I made the food and delivered it. I did script writing with a band named Yellow from Europe, and I could go on. So I had a very interesting adventure, but I had always, through all of this, since early childhood, had a feeling that I was supposed to live in the wilderness, and it always was there in the back of my mind. I mean, it never seemed practical. The opportunity wasn't there. I had no idea. I'd often, when driving through the woods with somewhere, I think, and see people living there, think, how in the world can they live here? How do they make a living? It was like, and I couldn't figure it out. And I didn't know anybody else that wanted to live in the wilderness. And so that was a showstopper. I had all kinds of reasons for not living in the wilderness, but by the time I got into my late 40s, it hit me that if I didn't do that, it was going to be too late, because it's already kind of late to start something like that. And I wasn't like an Amazon woman or anything. I'd been living, I called myself a poverty jet setter. I did a lot of traveling and was involved in culture and, all that stuff. But I knew that if I didn't do it, I would regret it at the end of my life. And so I made a decision that I was going to go, and there were several reasons for it. I'd had this thing my whole life that I had to do it as a calling. And I recognized that there were some, and for me, practical reasons to do it. One of them was back in the 90s, I realized that we were in danger of losing our heirloom seeds due to pollen drift from GMO, especially the corns and things like that. And I thought, if I could live in the middle of a huge wilderness and grow these seeds out, I could protect these heirloom crops from cross-contamination, cross-pollination, because that's an issue. That was one. Another one was I'd been working with herbs my whole life, but I didn't really know how to identify them. I hadn't, I grew a few of them, bought most of them, knew a few from my area, but to really be able to just get to know the plants in a major way, I hadn't really explored that. And I thought, if I lived in the wilderness, these would be my best friends, and I would really deepen my experience of working with plants. Another one was I guess I could say I'm a truth seeker. I prefer to think of myself as a truth finder. And I wanted to find out if some of my beliefs were true knowledge, and I had to put them to the test in order to do that. And one of my beliefs was that nature, the universe, is intelligent, and that if we can be in the most natural, right relationship with that, it's friendly and we're nurtured and we're taken care of, and everything goes the way that it's supposed to in our lives, and we're of service to the greater good of nature and universe, spirit, whatever you want to call it. And so the only way to really put that to the test was to go to a remote wilderness where there aren't any people or stores or telephones or money or anything but the ancient ways of the woods and the ancient ways of being a human in the woods. And so if I did that, then I would learn just how caring it would be, because I certainly didn't have the skills and knowledge that I needed to survive in that kind of a situation. I did know some things, but not enough. So I had all of those reasons, and I thought it would be healthier. And I also thought in that kind of environment, it would deepen my spiritual life, and that I could become closer to just the 0 point field is what I like to call it. I'm more of like these days. I thought I was a Buddhist at the time, but then I discovered I'm really probably a quantum idealist now. I lost a lot of my vocabulary in the woods somewhere.
Okay. And, I would think that, of course, at some point you began to forage. Had you had any understanding or knowledge about foraging food before you went into the
I was a quick study, when I realized I was doing this, I got the books. I got some videos to watch, and I was like, okay, I better really try to get a grasp. But see, I was in California, and those plants are real different from Arkansas. And so I just, I bought a few plant ID books to take with me and just trusted, and they were not the best. I've learned since then. They were not the best, but they were something. And that was part of the experiment. It's like, okay, nature, here I am. What are you going to do with me? Are you going to teach me? See, that was another thing. I had always read that indigenous peoples had learned their knowledge of the plants from the plants. And I really wanted to know if it was possible for someone like me to do that. I hadn't been brought up to do that, really. Even though my grandmothers were both grannywomen, my great-grandmother was Choctaw, they had been, to some degree, kind of silenced by the overpowering culture that had shunned their ways and told them to shut up because what they knew was primitive and inferior. But my one grandmother taught me quite a bit, but it was Colorado. So, it's a big picture, but I will say that by the time I got there, and I was standing up on the mountain looking down into the valley where I was going, I'm looking around and it hit me. It's like a contrast, like at one time, and for most people, it would just look like a wall of green. And it's kind of scary. But as I was just already looking around, I was going, oh my God, I'm looking at an ancient Walmart. It's like, this is a grocery store. And it's a pharmacy. And I was fascinated. I was like already hungry to not abuse it. And I never took what I didn't absolutely need. I would watch a plant grouping for 3 years before I would harvest anything from it, just to make sure that it was stable and that I wasn't going to hurt it. That was part of the relationship that I learned was necessary. Was like, okay, we're going to be a team, and we're going to teach you, Dakota. You're going to have to understand there's some rules here. And abide by these rules. And I got that pretty quickly. A lot of it was really about this deep respect for everything around me. It had a place, and it was, every little thing could be a potential teacher with a lesson I really needed to learn.
You're speaking to the understanding of permaculture.
Oh yeah. Well, I already knew permaculture before I went there, and
all our relations.
And I also, as I designed, I used permaculture techniques and principles to the best of my ability. really try not to disturb, but to enhance and work with, because I knew that the Native Americans had done that. They didn't just let the forest go, they managed the forest. It was a team. And when they stopped managing the forest became unhealthy.
I've heard you say before that you felt humans' mission and purpose on the planet was to be gardeners.
Yeah.
That we were here to take care of the plants.
Well, I think that's why they created us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because they needed, plants are very ambitious, and they are limited in certain ways, as we've seen, but they're very, very creative in interacting and co-creating different life forms and influencing genetics. And that's a whole other story, this story of evolutionary biology. But I do believe that it took them a long, long time, but they're patient, and eventually they created these great gardeners. And so, yeah.
I just want to go back just a moment, because I wanted to ask you, you were in Colorado, but you ended up in the Ozarks. How did you make that jump or decision?
Well, at that time I was in California.
In California, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
I had left the movie business and was really, there was nothing catching my fancy. I was at one of those turning points where it's like, okay, what do I do next? And there wasn't anything calling me except the one thing I hadn't done, going to the wilderness. And that didn't make any sense to me at the time, other than that it was a calling, because I had no clue how to do it, or where to go, and nothing. But I realized that nothing was going to happen until I made a decision that I was going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And if I made a decision, then everything would fall into place. So I had never actually made a decision to go to the wilderness, and that's why I didn't go. That's what it boiled down to.
Yeah, right.
So I made a decision, and when you make a decision and it's a real one, you can feel that being communicated through all of the cells of your body. There's a shift that happens where it's felt as a knowingness by your whole being.
Right.
And when that happened, I had a lucid dream that where I was flying over the United States looking for the wilderness I was going to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I flew into Arkansas. I'd never been here. I didn't know anything about Arkansas. I didn't really like the idea even of Arkansas. Mm-hmm. It seemed to me like just one of those backwards places that had nothing going for it, basically. But when I flew into Arkansas, it was breathtaking, the beauty, and there was a communication, kind of like a voice in the dream, telling me that I was supposed to be here, that I was needed here, and not to be concerned about how it was going to all be put together, but just know that I was supposed to be in Arkansas. Later, it occurred to me that my family had originated from the Ozarks, mostly I think the Missouri Ozarks, but that I hadn't really thought of that much. So I woke up that morning knowing that I was going to the wilderness in the Ozarks of Arkansas. Got on the computer and started researching it. Very quickly found that there was a defunct spiritual community located inside the Hurricane Creek Federal Wilderness Preserve, which is 15,000 acres inside the Ozark National Forest. No one lived there, but there was a building. Some preliminary work had been done to kind of set things up to live there, but no one had lived there for about 25 years. Mm-hmm. And I found the guy who, he had an online website. He was still trying to find people who lived there. And I contacted him and I said, well, I guess it's probably where I'm going. And one thing led to another,
Mm.
and that's where I wound up. And that's, of course, that voyage, I told you a little bit about that, but it was
Yeah.
all very magical. You know, the voice in the dream was right.
Right.
Money came to me to move. I had the right place, an amazing place was there, just waiting 25 years for somebody to arrive. And then once I got there, the little magical tour just kept
Yeah.
on and on and on.
I just love, I love the synchronicity. That's what Tracy's responding to in the chat room. And both Jerry and Tracy are really enjoying this very beautiful journey. And I'm going to make a jump here because we did speak to Botanicals and your bones. And I'm going to jump specifically to any part of this adventure that has nourished and cultivated your wisdom about the theme of today's episode.
There are actually a couple of things that I thought would be worth sharing, mostly because they're extraordinary, and I think that they can give inspiration and hope to people who find themselves in extraordinary circumstances. One of them happened to me when I was in my 30s, and and I want to share it because it's, I think, a great lesson for everybody. So, for example, Blue, if you had an injury that was severe enough for you to realize you had to go to the hospital, and at the hospital, your doctor seemed very excited about your injury, and in a very happy way is telling you that it's extraordinary, that nobody has ever seen anything like it, and you're going to be in a medical textbook. How would you feel?
Oh, whoa. Well, with who I am in this moment, the first thing is I got a little scared and nervous, right? And then I'd go, okay, then I'd calm myself down and go, okay, well, I need more facts. I need more information. But interestingly enough, my mother became one of those people. And it was a very fascinating story.
Okay.
And I won't go into the whole story, but basically she had, vertebrae were fused together. And when she came out of the operation, she was able to move her neck as if nothing had been fused, and really broke medical history. To this day, I don't even think they know how it occurred. It was very miraculous. Okay, but she was an experiment for the surgery at a major New York hospital. But I remember courage. And my mother happened to trust the medical industry, right?
Yeah.
So in this moment of who I am, woo, I would probably go to the database and start doing my homework, but that would be it. I wouldn't say no immediately, but it just brought up fear, and it's like, okay, I have to know a lot more.
Yeah. Well, that's how I felt. So what had happened was I had big plans to go dancing, which was very important to me. And this was at night, and I had to descend a metal staircase downwards. My feet slipped on the wet metal. I fell, and I slammed my elbow on the stair behind me and felt something go wrong in my shoulder. And I knew I'd injured myself, but, it was my opportunity to go dancing. And so I went dancing, and I danced in a kind of a different way than usual, but so I'm dancing, and I'm staying over at a friend's house. I wake up the next morning, and I'm in shock, cold, clammy, nauseated, and I told my friend, I think I have to go to the hospital. So she drives me, and it's really painful when you have a physical trauma to be driven anywhere. So all of you drivers out there, please remember that. You're taking somebody.
Right.
So we get to the hospital and they do an examination of my shoulder. And the doctor comes in and he tells me what I just told you, that it's, wow, we've never seen anything like this, and you're going to be in a medical textbook. And by the way, your doctor is going to be Dr. Lamont, who was one of the world's top orthopedic surgeons who worked on football people. And the hospital I was in was named after him. So they had referred me to the top doctor. And what had happened was it's a ball and socket joint there in the shoulder. And the whole interior ball portion had completely shattered. And the outside was fine, but it was just like little teeny fragments of bone in there. So I go to the doctor and he's curious about what's going to happen. He tells me that there's really nothing to be done. He's going to put me in a sling and see how it goes for about a month. And the bone's in my arm is either going to die, and they might have to put in a prosthetic shoulder, or maybe it'll heal. But he didn't know and come back in a month. So I go home with my arm in a sling, and this was like in the early 80s, and I think, or maybe it was, anyway. So I go home with my arm in a sling, and I had asked him, I was a violinist, and I had asked him if I'd be able to play violin anymore. It was the shoulder where you hold the violin up. Mm-hmm. And he said he didn't know, probably I might not be able to play the violin anymore. And so when I went home, I think it was the next day, I decided that I was going to play the violin. And so I sat down on the floor and I propped my elbow up on the floor and I would start playing the violin. And then I decided that for this to heal, it would need circulation, and so I had to be moving it. So for that whole month, I was moving my arm around until I was able to have complete range of motion by the time I went back. And one of the things that he did when he looked at the x-rays, he thought that he didn't see that it was healed. But when I showed him how I could move my arm, he said, well, I operate on people, not x-rays. Mm. And so the arm completely healed, even though he didn't know how in the world did it happen. And I think it was purely because my body was talking to me. Later on, I learned that they had changed their thinking about injuries, joint injuries, that you're supposed to move a joint that's been injured or even broken in order for it to heal properly. Mm-hmm. So that my body, my whole self had told me that if I wanted to heal it, I needed to be moving it. So that's just kind of a little bit of I think, an encouragement to people who wind up with something that's beyond what the doctors know to do with. You have within your own self, if you can trust yourself, your body's going to give you some guidelines of what to do. It's like I knew how much I could move my arm, and I knew not to go beyond what it told me to, and I knew that I had to move it, not just hold it still in that sling. Right. The other one happened in the wilderness, and of course the story there, as you know, most of you, I think, I was alone without any means to communicate with the outside world at all. So if I got hurt, it's just me. So I broke my femur one day. And the interesting thing about that is that when you break your leg in that kind of circumstance, again, it can't stop you from doing all the things you have to do every day too, because there's a lot of physical labor involved in taking care of the essentials. So I broke my femur, and I had comfrey, and I had burdock, two of my emergency plants that I really had to fight rabbits off and deer off the comfrey all the time. So I was really glad that I'd done that. I had the comfrey and I pounded it, the leaves to release the juice, and I wrapped comfrey leaves around my femur and bound them up. And fortunately, I had some crutches. The little cabin was pretty well outfitted with basic emergency health first aid stuff. And I was able to get around. But there again, it was like I was not in bed with, my leg elevated and all that kind of stuff. I was out in the garden. I was taking care of the guineas. I was harvesting. I was tending, the fire. I was doing all of these things that I had, carrying water, all of these things that had to be done. I was moving around, and my leg was healed in about a month. I just had to keep changing out the pull ties. I kept the comfrey on it.
And the femur, Dakota, that's between the hip and the knee? Is that where our femur is?
The femur is lower leg. Actually, I should check to make sure.
Oh, is it below the knee?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's between the knee and the foot.
Yeah.
All right.
And and that's another story of how I broke it. I also broke a rib there. I got injured quite regularly. And had opportunities to test out different things for healing. But what I discovered was that I would heal really fast. And I think it was a combination of having the plants that I needed to help me.
And getting some answer to your question about, is there a benevolent universe?
Yeah.
You were being assisted.
I was being assisted, and also it's kind of like there was any injury there was a life and death injury. So it was like the will to recover quickly at a deepest level is there, saying, okay, guys, we can't, this isn't going to be something where you're going to get a disability payment and stay home and watch soap operas.
Right. Yeah, and nobody's going to deliver pizza.
No, and you can't hand your chores off to anybody. It's like this is they were all serious in their own way, but I think that called up. There needs to be, one of the things I've learned is that we have to make, just as I made a decision to go to the wilderness, and it wouldn't happen until I did. Yeah. When it comes to healing, we need to make a decision to heal. And so we decide, and that communicates to all of the cells in our body, and they know what to do, how to do it. It's the body that knows how to heal. Right. And I think sometimes it needs our permission.
Well, I just really am grateful with you sharing your stories and us continuing to demonstrate the relations to the mother, to the plants, all this intelligence that's within us. And so we will continue to bring granny woman stories to these episodes. And but right now it's time to bring it to a close.
Hey, next time we've got Anne back. Anne Merrill from Berlin.
Oh, okay, that's good. Yeah. When we had Anne Merrill was here with us from Berlin, the last Herbal Knowledge Keeper episode. Well, we had some internet problems, and I had ended up on the show with Anne, and we realized we were just touching the tip of the iceberg with a real comparative conversation of the USA and Berlin and our relations to herbs. So the next episode with Granny and myself, we're going to have Anne back on the show. And next week, I'm going to have Phoenix co-hosting with Get Lit. Rebecca still is doing some business concerns. And so I hope that everyone gets to come join us next week. I know we'll have a good show. I can't tell you the title yet, but it'll be advertised on Facebook and on CCN. And I want to thank Tracy and Jerry again. You're awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks for hanging out with us. I love you. And they're so grateful. They've just been sharing so much love with us. And thank you, Conscious Consumer Network.tv. Thank you, Biggie and Mel, our co-producers, for doing such an awesome job. And again, please visit Full Bloom Productions and any contributions
And sign up for the database.
and sign up for the database. And both those URLs are on the broadcast window. All right, y'all. We gotta, thank you. You guys rock too. And it's our chatters, man. They're so cool. And they're hanging with us. All right, we love you. And don't hesitate to communicate with us anytime during the week, social media. We are here for you. Mwah. Love y'all.
If we want to change the world, we must first change the media. Mainstream media exists for the purposes of indoctrination and manipulation of public perception. The world of free and independent media is growing, and with the upsurge in information now available in the public domain, it has never been easier to access free and independent media. The exploration of this information resulted in an experimental project which would provide a fully supported space for researchers, whistleblowers, and seekers of all kinds to express themselves and educate the world. On the 1st of January 2015, Conscious Consumer Network was launched to the world. Nobody thought we would make it this far, but CCN is the longest running free and independent media network of its kind. CCN is a unique collaboration of hearts and souls, bringing you information from different perspectives to educate and inform. Since we started CCN, we have had only one desire: the pursuit of a free, fair, just, sustainable world, and this has not changed. Having overcome many challenges over the last 2 years, CCN is here to stay, and we've got great things lined up for 2017. Help keep CCN on the air by supporting the 2017 Network Support Fund.